Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's Book of the Day show. I'm talking with the amazing Adam Braun and his New York Times best-selling book, The Promise of a Pencil. A little bit of warm day here in my backyard, Beverly Hills, California stays nice and toasty these days. This book is going to hit you on multiple levels. It has the potential, I just tell you this, to change your life. Why? Because as you're going to hear, Adam, he's a big believer in not just for-profit business or non-profit, but for purpose. You know, as the old saying goes, what does it profit a man to gain the world and lose his soul? And you can interpret that whether you be religious or not religious, in the sense that a life without purpose, whatever you consider purpose, is basically meaningless. And so we're gonna go in here with Adam's on the line on how he went from, thinking he was going to be in high finance and just making money, to going out, traveling the world, 40 or 50 countries, backpacking, and discovering a purpose from just a poor homeless person in India's words to him, how that changed the trajectory of his life. Talk about his mentors, wise words of wisdom that they gave him that really kept him from taking a job that you'll see turned out to be a company that went bankrupt, and thank goodness they didn't go down that route. So it's just an amazing story. A lot of you know who Adam Braun is. He has Richard Branson here recommending the book, Deepak Chopra. He spoke at the White House. He's spoken multiple times for the United Nations, for the Clinton Global Initiative. So Adam, thanks so much for being on today's call.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. Happy to be here.
Got all kinds of good stuff here. Spoke at the White House, the Clinton Global Initiative, United Nations. Was that when Clinton was the president, or?
So I spoke at the United Nations a couple times now, but the Clinton Global Initiative was after he was president, but really when he started to kind of kick off CGI, and they were kind enough to reach out to me and have me participate in the event.
Awesome. So let's just jump right in here. There's this saying, there's the known knowns, that is the things we know, and then there's the known unknowns, the things we know we don't know, but then there's also the unknown unknowns. And you talk about this line, the single most powerful element of youth is that you don't have the life experiences to know what can't be done. So when you were starting out, did you have any idea it would grow into this big charity and this big movement? And maybe talk a little bit about how you took it from just an idea, because I meet everybody and most people have ideas, but very few people actualize them. Can you just walk us through that?
Sure. So, there were kind of two moments. There was one where I had the idea for the organization. So just to kind of give the brief backstory, I was born in New York. I grew up in Connecticut, and just had a real interest in business, in particular finance, since I was pretty young. I traded basketball cards, and picking stocks kind of seemed like the adult version of that. And so I opened up an E-Trade account when I was 13. I started working at a hedge fund when I was 16. That was on the funds by the time I was 19. And I was on this fast track to this Wall Street career that I was really excited about. But when I was 21, I went into the developing world for the first time as a study abroad student on the semester at sea program. And when I got to each country that we traveled to, I would ask one child in each country a simple question, and that was, if you could have anything in the world, what would you want most? And when I went to India, the poverty was just the most stark and devastating I had ever seen, and I felt pretty helpless. And that's where I met a street beggar, and I asked him, and his answer, if he could have anything in the world, was a pencil. So I gave him my pencil, he just lit up, and I started asking questions, and I realized this boy had never been to school before in his life. And that was just something that I never considered to be reality. I think growing up in the States, you assume every kid has the opportunity to go to school. Maybe it's a really poor school, maybe it's well attended, or the teachers don't pay attention, but a kid who had never been to school for a day in his life was just kind of unfathomable to me. So I started backpacking and traveling through a lot of different countries, about 40 or 50 in my early 20s, and just kept on living in these communities and seeing how little support they got, but how they had the same level of, I would say, desire and vigor and dignity and humility that anyone else that I'd ever met had, and that my family kind of was in that position 2 generations ago. You know, my grandparents living in the rural countryside of Eastern Europe. And it was through education that things got elevated for my dad to grow up as an immigrant in New York with almost nothing, and then, you know, again, invest in his education and then create a better life for his kids. And, you know, my siblings and I went to great public schools and felt like we had, you know, great opportunities because of it. And so, anyway, I just became really impassioned about it. But I started working in New York, and I found myself at a great job. I was working at Bain & Company, arguably the top consulting firm out there. Mm-hmm. And I was watching how all these Fortune 500 companies were being run and learning so much in the process. But at the same time, I felt really frustrated that so little of that for-profit business acumen was actually being applied to the way that nonprofits ran themselves. And so, you know, I volunteered, I participated in different nonprofits, and it always felt like people, you know, just brought a lot of passion to the table, which is important, but they couldn't oftentimes wed that to for-profit business acumen. And so while they could take really pretty photos and tell great stories, they weren't actually producing results. And that's what I heard about most, because that's kind of how I've always viewed the world, and in particular running any business. So my grandma was turning 80 just before my 25th birthday, and I got this idea. Bain lets you go on what they call an externship. It's basically a 6 to 9 month sabbatical. And I pitched them on letting me leave and start something entrepreneurial, and that was called Pencils of Promise. And this is where I can kind of address your question, which is, I know it was going to become a big organization. The night that I thought of the name of the organization and the idea that I could use the externship and crowdsource the money from friends in increments of, you know, 20 or 30 bucks, I knew I could pull that off. And most people said it was crazy because this is October 2008, you know, the worst economic period in New York in 50 years, maybe more, since the Great Recession. And so everyone else said it was crazy. But to the quote that you were referencing that I write about in the book, you know, the most powerful element of youth is that you're too young to know what's impossible. Right. And so in that, you're willing to try. And so I didn't realize how impossible it would be. And I was like, I can go for this. I think I can pull it off. And it was really after the very first party, which was my birthday. I just asked friends to get $20 at the door for a birthday party on Halloween when I'm born. And there was one girl in particular who followed up with me and said, I want to get involved. I said, okay, all right. And at this point, it was just a personal project to honor my grandmother and raise the funds on the side of my job and even put in some of the capital I had saved to personally fund the school. And this girl said, you know, this is exactly what I'm looking for. I work in real estate, but I have relationships to people that do corporate sponsorship for events. I think for our next event, we can get a liquor sponsor and a food sponsor and maybe even a venue sponsor. And I was like, whoa, what do you mean our next event? Like, you want to be a part of this too? Because I thought, you know, everyone just thought I was crazy. And as soon as this one person said to me, yeah, I really believe in it. I mean, her name's Mimi Wen. She'll tell you this exactly. You know, this is probably 6 weeks after the organization was founded. We had $8,000 in our bank account. And I said to her very directly that night, I said, Mimi, if you are willing to invest in this the way that I know I am, and I just have even one other person, I guarantee that there are many others that out there that feel this way, and we will collectively build hundreds of schools together in the coming years. And it was such a ridiculous thing to say back then, but I just knew it would happen. I just absolutely knew it. And then everything after that was about putting in the work.
Yeah, it's a great story. I think that you hit on all kinds of points. One of the interesting ones I will talk about a little bit later is the business side of things. And people really misunderstand, I think, when it comes to charity. Most charities misunderstand what business is. So they go, we're not a business, we're a charity. We're not here to make profit. But really, if, you know, Peter F. Drucker, the greatest of all business professors and teachers, he says the purpose of a business is never to make a profit. That is a necessity. The purpose of a business is the creation of a customer. And the second the mindset of a business, of a charity, switches to that, then it becomes aligned and realizes it is a business. It's the business in this case. And you generally, in business, have two customers. You have, in the case of a charity, the donors, and then the people that you're giving the money to. But I want to talk on the business a little later. Let's go back to this concept of destiny. A lot of people listening to this, and one of the most common questions, I think, really in the world at large is, what am I doing with my life? Is it something meaningful? And you say something, you know, many of us spend our entire lives in the same bubble. We surround ourselves with people who share our opinions, speak the same way we speak and look the way we look. We fear leaving those familiar surroundings, which is natural. But through exploration of the unfamiliar, we stop focusing on the labels that define what we are, and we discover who we are. And I'm a little like you. I've been lucky enough to go to about 51 countries, and I think that was an integral part. How important for people, in wealthy countries? A lot of people listening. We have 40 countries listening in, but for those of people in the first world countries, how important do you think it is to just get on a plane and make an adventure out of it and just go see India and go see Bangladesh and go see the favelas of Brazil? Do you think that's an integral part in almost every, or should be an integral part in almost every person's life?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I think the most powerful thing that any individual can really do, besides obviously surround themselves with people who really make them better, is to get outside of their comfort zone. And so there's another line in the book, true self-discovery begins where your comfort zone ends. And I just find that to be so true. But the one thing that I would kind of caveat that with is the idea that getting out of your comfort zone doesn't necessarily have to mean global travel. Oftentimes it can be travel into, the other side of your town where you've never really spent much time. It can also mean trying out new hobbies or activities that you've never done before. So an example of that for me is when I was on semester at sea as a 21-year-old, my whole identity at that point in my life was as a basketball player. I played basketball since I was a kid. I was recruited to play college basketball. As a 21-year-old on semester at sea, my whole identity at that point in time was as a basketball player. I'd been playing basketball my whole life. I was recruited to college for basketball, and suddenly I'm on the ship. And my closest friend on the ship, who had also mainly played sports throughout his life, came up to me pretty early on in the voyage and said, "Hey, do you want to go do improv? This guy's teaching improv classes, and he's creating an improv troupe." And I remember thinking, like, you're out of your mind. I'm an athlete. Athletes don't do drama. We don't act in plays. We don't do improv. But this guy, my closest friend, was up for it, and I felt like, maybe I'll learn something by getting out of my comfort zone. And it was the improv troupe that I ended up joining and literally performing twice, 2 huge shows on our ship to the other students, that eventually gave me the comfort and confidence to become a really effective public speaker. And so anyone who's ever seen me speak at an event knows I don't read from notes. Everything is off the cuff. But that level of comfort was only developed because of getting outside my comfort zone. So, while I would definitely say that a person should prioritize travel, and ideally you can get to remote parts of the world that challenge your way of thinking and, make you recognize how big the world is and how little your little bubble is within it. But at the same time, I think that you can also be creative in finding ways to challenge yourself and get out of your comfort zone.
Yeah. One of my mentors, Joel Salatin, used to always say, you can always bloom where you're planted. Whether you live in a small town or a big city, there's always people in need. I mean, if you go in LA, if you go down to Skid Row, I was down there not too long ago, and it's just like, almost as, I've been to India. It's not quite as poor as India, but there's all kinds of, poverty.
Exactly.
Now, let's talk about, kind of switch gears here to this broad concept, which you touch on throughout the book, about just destiny in general. Some people are going to start for-profit businesses. Some people are going to be entrepreneurs, intrapreneurs, work in someone else's organization. Some people are going to start charities like you've done. How do you think people, or maybe we'll start, how did you get that clarity, like, yes, this is me, and how do you think people listening in, some of the good tools to really know with some level of certainty that your life's on the right track in terms of, destiny? Are you doing the career that really fulfills you? Are you with the people that really